Almost on time. Oh, that's pretty good, you know. Hello everyone, welcome to this panel, the long and the short of it, where four comic creators, what else in this place of the world, will be talking about their experience of working on long form and shorter form work. Lucy Sullivan, Zen K, Daniel Merlin Goodbrey and Paul B Rainey. Where shall we start? Shall I start at your end, Lucy, and we'll work our way down? Everyone will say a little bit about their work, and then we can see where the conversation goes. I mean, Lucy, you kind of made your name in the comics world through starting off with a graphic novel with Barking,
yes.
And then since have done shorter work.
Yeah.
I mean, before you did Barking, had you done short stories just for yourself, or did you launch straight into it?
No, I did. I bought them, a set of zines, because I went to Ladies Do Comics and Mark Stafford was there. We weren't friends at that point. We are now. And everyone was introducing themselves and going, "Hi, my name is, and I'm working on my graphic novel, blah, blah, blah." And Mark went, "God, why is everyone, no one does short stories. Why does everyone?" And I thought, God, why am I doing graphic novel? I should go and do some short stories. So I made some zines. Also met Rachel House, who's an amazing zine maker. And she gave me some zines for free, and I just sort of melted and went, "Oh my God, these are amazing." So I made these one-page ones, and from that, found that I use them now to figure out story points and story ideas, because it's a really good, quick way. So I limit myself. So these are my first ones. So 1 in 4 zines, and I got my first review with Andree in Broken Frontier, and I was like, "Oh, I've made it!" I got a review, which is amazing because they're like literally 1 page, and they fold out to like a single illustration, and it's a set of 4, and just that someone will review that is just incredible. So yeah, so it was those whilst making Barking, which obviously it's a little bit of a size change, as you can see, and it took a long time. And then, now just more a mixture of short and long form as well.
And even with that first project, when you tried out the odd idea as a zine, as a fold-out zine, did that help with your process? Did it clarify?
Yeah, it was particularly the lettering, because that was a side of it that was completely new for me. And I kind of really went for it with the lettering. And Andy gave me a really nice review about the lettering, and I thought, phew, I can do that in the book, and people aren't going to be like, I broke a lot of rules with Barking about how you're supposed to make comics and lay them out. And I thought I was going to really ruffle feathers, and some people hate it. It's fine. My Goodreads score's terrible. People are like, "I can't understand what's going on." You're like, "You're not supposed to," you know. It's very helpful. I think it's a great way to test ideas, see who your audience might be, see what people are interested in when they talk to you about your stuff. I really recommend zine making or short form comics making, definitely, especially before diving into a big old graphic novel, which will take years of your life away.
Indeed. Zen, you have your 2 projects with you, The House on 52 Carlton Street and Runaway Mayhem. House on Carlton Street is obviously kind of like a short graphic novel, while Mayhem is more of a novella, but it also exists as the prologue to perhaps a longer project.
Yeah, a longer story.
So in a way you're kind of dabbling with long form and short form at the same time with that work.
Yeah.
Was that kind of something that appealed to you, starting out as a comic creator?
So for The House on 52 Carlton Street, it was mostly like a thesis project, because I was doing like a master's in illustration. So I was basically doing my thesis on like visual media, which kind of covered comics, and then it was kind of tying into horror a little bit. So I kind of I spent a year doing like research on basically horror media, which kind of covered comics as well, and I wanted to kind of convey like a sinister sort of vibe with this. So it was supposed to be like a self-contained story, like something that wouldn't exceed more than 40 pages.
Okay.
And
both to make it manageable as part of the MA, and then something you could publish afterwards.
Yeah, and I kind of just worked with this black and white sort of like manga inspired style, because I did like this is like my first actual finished comic, but I did dabble into comics before, like really short ones, maybe 2-3 pages kind of things. And Runaway was like, it was on a strict deadline because it was for Shortbox Comics Fair 2024, last year's. So I knew the sort of story that I wanted to tell was going to be like sci-fi-ish, and I had like a basic background setting, but it was also like, it was kind of a huge world that I couldn't fully explore because, so I just wanted it to be like a prologue to a larger story that I haven't really gotten into exploring further, but like I want to one day.
Well, then in a way, because you've done it as a short story that you might explore further, it is both thinking about it as a short form comic and potentially part of the
longer one. Potentially one day if I want to really expand upon it.
But you said that when you were working on Carlton Street, you'd also done a few 1- and 2-page comics. When you're doing the very short work, is that so that you can kind of try out an idea, so you can try out characters? Something that short, it's almost like something that is more like a joke with a punchline, I guess.
Because for Carlton Street specifically, it wasn't really like conclusive stuff that I was doing. It was mostly like test pages, basically. Like I had maybe a scene envisioned that I wanted to maybe draw in like 1 or 2 pages, or like a sequence, sort of like that. And other times they were just like unrelated. Maybe like for a different piece of media, it could be just like something personal, just like a 1-page thing, just so I could test out like a visual style maybe, or just something silly. But I've mostly worked with like short form comics because like planning and doing really long works is like something still really daunting to me.
Nice. Daniel, sorry, this is weird. I'm going to have to do this. You're kind of, I guess, better known for doing webcomics that perhaps kind of are shorter form, but you have done also print graphic novels as well back in the day. And moving back and forth between something that is shorter form and something that is longer form, is it that when you have an idea, you think perhaps this will work better for this format and other ideas will work better for another?
I think when I started out, everything was actually kind of short form because I was doing a lot of experimental work, and I even just doing stuff for print, I wanted to do short stories because it felt like a better way to learn. Actually, a lot of the webcomics I do now, because I don't have much time, are kind of longer form because it's much easier to do a sustained narrative every week than it is to kind of reinvent your narrative every week. So the series I just wrapped up, Solid Metal Override, that was about 200 pages in the end. Wow. And the one I've just started, The Occasional Adventures of Lemmer and Spur, I don't know how long it'll be, but I'm imagining it's going to be about 4 years long. So for me, the interesting thing about the web for long form is that I genuinely don't know where the story's going. I write it more or less week to week. I get a bit of a head start, so I'm not if I have a block, I'm not desperately trapped. I try and get about 10 weeks ahead. But other than that, I never, other than setting up an engine of, okay, these are characters in a situation which I know is going to produce story, and I write enough of it that I know it's going to produce story, and then I just kind of go. And then I let the end find it about halfway through the comic.
Okay. Well, I went to a talk a couple of weeks ago by Ben Aronovich, who's a novelist who does the Rivers of London series, and he said that he's been doing, there's like 12 books now, and he's going to keep going. That sometimes he doesn't know where the characters are going to go, and sometimes because you've created a character that has such a distinct personality, the characters almost tell you where their narrative is going to go. Do you find that as well?
Absolutely, yeah. That's the nice thing, is just you get your characters, you let them talk, basically, and then you just kind of see where it goes, more or less. I mean, you have to, especially once the plot emerges, you have to kind of nudge them, because especially if ideally you've got some themes or you've got something you're trying to do, and so you've got a direction the characters are moving in, and eventually you kind of can't let them get off track too much, because actually no, I am trying to end this now. Ending things is, I always massively underestimate how long a story will take to end once I start to end it. Okay, it's time to wrap this up now, I want to do something new. A couple of months, 3 months and I can end this, and then it will be another 2 years. Okay, now I've ended it. But again, it's a nice thing about the web, you're not working to a particular page size or limit, you just go until it's done.
And I suppose, this panel is about the differences between long form and short form. With some of your webcomics, though, as they're interactive, they could potentially be both a short form comic and a long form comic, depending because they're partially interactive, what narrative path the reader has taken. So they might choose to just go on a short form journey and not backtrack for the long form one. So I guess that's something you have to plan in as well, the micro story alongside the macro.
Yeah. I think with interactive stuff, there's definitely, everyone's going to have a different experience of it, and it's going to be kind of unique to that person, kind of based on the choices they make. I tend to, so this is, although this is an example of an interactive comic, this is You Are Not a Sandwich and Yet You Are a Sandwich, in which you play as a dead sandwich journeying through the afterlife, and you kind of make choices kind of as you go. But this is an example of like a kind of classic choose your own adventure structure, and in a way they're actually the least satisfying to write, because unless someone's going to read it several times, they're only going to get like one of the pathways. So when I started out, I kind of steered away from this kind of stuff, intended to write more hypercomics where people kind of just select where they want to go next, but it's not like making a choice for the character, it's just kind of discovering another bit of the narrative. So it feels a bit more kind of like a kind of a detective type thing, where you're trying to kind of piece together the connections as you kind of go through it. And in that way, there's people just kind of stop reading when they feel like they've got it, or where they kind of drift away from it. So there's not kind of clear end to it, or a clear length to it.
Interesting. And Paul, you've obviously worked on short form and long form as well. The kind of the classic British short form comic, a single page gag strip in a magazine like Viz, and then obviously much longer graphic novels such as No Time Like the Present. Were you doing both at kind of the same time? And if so, did you find trying out an idea in a small strip would help an idea in the longer work, and vice versa?
Yes.
Okay, moving on.
But when I was doing Why Don't You Love Me, that was really intense. And so I would take breaks and do short form strips, which are, I have my USP, I guess, but they felt tonally different from my perspective. And they're good discipline, even for long form strips, I think, because it encourages you to be direct and distill things down and not pad it out. So I think there's a tendency in a lot of, if you're doing a long form strip, you might feel compelled to give as much space to something as you think it needs, when in fact it might not need that much space. You can chop things out, which is actually really, really good fun to do. And you can learn that discipline by doing a short strip, I think. So Viz typically is like 20 panels a page, and so you want to hit all the beats and you want to make the joke land, but it's more than 3 panels, so you want to work on making that joke funnier, I guess, by prolonging it in a way that works and presenting the characters, but then the disciplines you learn in that can be utilised in the long strip, I think. I don't think they're mutually exclusive necessarily. I don't know why I'm accusing you of that, of saying that, but yeah, I feel that. But it was very helpful to me to do short strips whilst I was working on Why Don't You Love Me, because I always have an eye. I do everything in chronological order. I have an eye on what's going to happen in the story and what the characters are going to do, and it was good to just spend time with some fun characters and then go back and do the heavy stuff, or what seemed heavy stuff.
And also, was it ever that you were kind of like stuck working on the longer form and you think, I need to just kind of take a break from it by doing something shorter and then go back?
Yeah, it's like a palate cleanser.
Exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, I felt like I was being flushed out.
Well, Viz makes loads of games about it. And something that you and Dan have in common is that also you've serialised your graphic novels. Dan as webcomics, you as individual chapters that were printed as comics before they were collected.
And web. Just not as accomplished.
And I did mine in print as well.
Well, there you go. So you both,
not as accomplished.
Does that help as well, thinking about things in more manageable chunks before,
Yes.
and how they work as part of a longer piece?
So if you're doing a long piece, it's going to be depressing because it will take years of your life, and you can't think about a third of the way through the thing when you're working on page 1, panel 1. You've got to think in terms of, I'll just see if I can get a panel drawn, and then half a page and then a page. You've got to think as those things as achievements. Why Don't You Love Me Again was done as self-contained single pages that all pieced together into a cohesive whole. But I felt like I wrote and drew a page at a time because I knew it'd take me years and I didn't want to be over familiar with this thing. By the time I got to write and draw that section, I didn't want to be bored by it. You know, you want to have space for spontaneity, and I felt I always try and approach each big project with different criteria and boundaries, although I can't assume the reader's going to notice that, but if at least the approach from me makes it fit, gives me some vigour for it.
Yeah. And I guess also the other thing that both of you have in common is that if you're doing a shorter slice of a graphic novel as a webcomic or as a floppy, and then it'll be collected in a print edition, it's a different reproduction of that bite of story. It might go from different page sizes to larger page sizes to smaller. It might go from something that you read on the screen to something that comes into a print comic. Do you think about those things, or do you just think about the story and then hope when the reproduction comes it'll work in a different format?
With Why Don't You Love Me? I didn't imagine someone would print a collection, so I thought of that as like when I enjoyed Seinfeld very much, but I watched it all in the wrong order. I came in midway through, then discovered earlier episodes, and a mate lent me a video collection, and I imagined people. I like the idea of people experiencing Why Don't You Love Me like that, tumbling in halfway through and finding older ones, and then obviously you would miss out on so much in that way, but I would have liked it to have worked that way, whereas of course once it's collected that's the optimum version, and that it's being observed, isn't it? That's when the particle assumes a state, whereas prior to that it could have been any number of things, even though it was still being drawn a single page at a time and being shared online. And once the book collection happens, that's it, done. It's there.
Okay. And for you, Dan?
I think arguably too much about that idea. It's what I call a format flexible approach to creating comics. I wrote a chapter on it for a book called Lessons Drawn, which is, because when I'm not doing this, I'm a lecturer, so I have to do research as well. But I've always thought about if it's going to be a webcomic, how is it also going to be a print comic? And if it's going to be a webcomic, can it be both like a webtoon and also a page for my site? So a lot of my long form stuff is designed with multiple formats in mind, and then you have to start. Like I think what you're saying with it being written as a page, and it can each series of standalone pages. That's a really good approach, because then it's gonna work in each kind of format. But it does mean also that each page reads like a standalone page. So that will read quite differently to how we think of a graphic novel. We think of this kind of ongoing narrative. And you have to kind of decide, often with a format flexible work, you think about, well, what's my primary format? So what's the one I'm going to write it for first? But then how do I try to make it such a way that's still going to work for well in multiple different kind of ways? Just because each format tends to have its own audience. So each format you do it for is going to bring a different group of people to read it. So that's why it's worth thinking about that. Again, especially when you're a starting out creator or a smaller creator, because anything you can do to reach a larger audience is really useful.
Well, and I guess, Lucy, you've got an example of that right there. You were talking about trying out some of the ideas for barking as zines and then bringing out the graphic novel. First of all, there are people who might only ever buy zines because they don't invest in graphic novels. But also, folding out the zine into A4 compared to the B5 or whatever it is, format of the graphic novel, and then the other printing. Was that anything that you worried about at the time, or was it more about telling the story, and then if there was ever a different kind of reprint, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it?
What, in terms of
reformatting the graphic?
No, well, I think I was... With Barking, I actually originally was going to self-publish it, and I was going to do it in 10 chapters, 2 chapters per comic, and put out 5 comics. And then it wasn't until I got introduced to Zen K, and she was at Unbound, there's a whole other conversation to have about that at some point, that I thought, it could be a collected thing. So it was always going to be this similar form. And actually, this is a self-made hero size, and I kind of really wanted self-made hero, didn't get them, but I made my book to their size just in case they liked it and it was the right size. But I liked the size of it. Whereas with the zines, I love paper engineering. I've got another set that I can't unpack, but it's called How to Build a Free Woman. And each zine is based around a letter and then folds into the letter and makes up a sentence. And that was like a 2 a.m. thing where I was like, oh, I could. And I loved figuring out how to put in the scores and the folds to make it. So this is more like a fun, mental, like palette cleanser, exactly, away from the kind of long, drawn-out process of figuring out a graphic novel and the long storylines and stuff. But when I make a zine, I set myself a 48-hour maximum window. It's all automatic writing and drawing, so I do a day of writing and drawing, and then I scan it all in, and the next day I just play with the layouts and see what I can do, and play with some bits of paper and see what folds I can do and what could be interesting. It's amazing what you can do with one piece of paper, you know. So they're just a play, whereas this was, I think, if you're going to go down the graphic novel route, pick your format early on. Like, have that in mind almost immediately. And then you can, when you're starting to lay out your pages and stuff, you know where you're heading to with it. And think about cost of the size of the book. You know, you have to be really practical because it's years of your life.
Boundaries, don't you?
Yeah,
you start a graphic novel.
You really do. And the amount of people I talk to.
You can be as free as you like, but you need to understand what your own boundaries are.
Definitely. And have the format. Like, go and look at books and see which size you like and what might be good to draw at. And like, I draw very, very small, so I can't do a big book anyway, you know, so it's like you've got to find your comfort zone in that, I think, as well. The only thing I did discuss with Avery Hill, because this is second edition, so I left Unbound, and now with Avery Hill, we did talk about maybe making it a bit bigger, but because it's hardback, that's more cost in the production, so there's a lot of numbers that come into it as well, you know. But no, format's fun.
Because I was going to say, you know, a more recent project is Shelter, where you're publishing individual vignettes that could then become a graphic novel. Well, are you thinking of the bits that might be collected?
So I did this one first. It's a self-contained story to just figure out the universe, and then I got an Arts Council grant, a DYCP, and I did just to research and write a graphic novel for the next part. So that's going to be with Avery Hill, and I'm working on it now, and it's about 200 pages of watercolour and carbon, so it's taken a while. We're currently looking at 2027, I think, for it. So yeah, it was meant to be next year, but I'm a year behind, so it's going to be the year after.
With the occasional zine in the middle to sell a caption 2026.
Yeah, I've actually got one about death anxiety brewing, so I'm going to put that in because I have that really bad. Especially when you're making a graphic novel, you'll get such bad death anxiety. You'll get towards the end and think, I'm going to get run over now, and it will never get finished. It's terrible. So there's a zine in that, definitely.
Nice. And Zen, you know, with these graphic novels, I was intrigued by the format, and obviously this kind of smaller book is that kind of manga takuban size, which I guess perhaps in a way it's very sensible that you're working that size, because loads of young people think of comics as looking like that. But was that a choice that you were making as part of the MA, thinking about the final product and how it might be marketable, or was it just that was a format that appealed to you?
I feel like it was a bit of both, because I did print it out for like the final exhibition. So I did like have a printed version in mind while I was making it, like making sure that the pages would be like the proper DPI and everything. But like eventually the idea to like pitch it to a publisher came to my mind, and we did discuss sizing when we, because like I think I drew this in A5 size, and Koguchi has like an in-house size. They have like 2 different ones, I think. So this was like the one they use for like shorter form stuff.
Okay.
And they have like a anthology size, which is like a bit bigger. So that's basically, because like that would be something that would look good in this size too, because it's a bit smaller than A5, I think, but it's not quite like A6. So I didn't have that size in mind, and when he sent me like my publisher, when Koguchi sent me like proofs of them, I really thought they were so cute, because like It's cute, right? So I was personally really happy with it because like it's not like the text was hard to read. It's quite like legible too.
But I guess that also then leads to all sorts of other decisions you have to make when you're creating the comic. That if you're aiming at an A4 size product, you know what you can fit on a page, literally. And similarly with a much smaller page size, you have to think about what can I fit and make it readable and have story beats and so on. Was that a huge challenge, or were you someone who was already a reader of kind of smaller comics, smaller manga comics, and so that way of thinking was already in your head?
Yeah, I feel like it was sort of in my head because I did do like a lot of research and kind of like looking at how other people kind of place their panels. Like it's very easy to sort of make it like really congested or like really wordy when you're doing pages. So I just kind of made it like a rule for me that no more than 5 panels per page. So that way the text doesn't really get cramped or anything. So it's like something that I had in mind while I was doing it.
Nice. When it was exhibited, was it A5 pages, or did you blow some of them up bigger?
So the exhibition, I feel like I might have pictures of it, but I had to scroll really back. But it was printed in like a staple bound A5 size when I exhibited it, and I had like a huge A1 printed sheet in the back where I had some of the like close-ups of some panels showcased, so people who didn't browse through the books would have at least an idea of what the contents inside the book would be. So I had like 2 giant A1 sheets behind me.
Oh, nice.
That had like close-ups of the panels.
Because I was intrigued by Lucy saying that because of the size of art that she makes, it won't necessarily go beyond a certain printing size. And so I guess that's also a challenge as well when you're working towards something that's small, thinking how big can I make it, even if it's only for an exhibition.
You can scan really high DPI though. If you go at sort of 600, which is crazy, but a lot of DPI, you could do it bigger, but it is, you have to find your boundaries, don't you?
Exactly.
Because obviously, when I think of your work, Dan, something that you also do is bring physical versions of your webcomics into actual spaces. So at the University of Hertfordshire, where Daniel lectures, he's put webcomics along the walls of corridors, so to read them you have to physically walk along the space. So I guess when people are encountering them that way, you have to think about it in a different style.
Creating for physical spaces, it's a lot like working for the screen, because you've got this, what for the screen McLeod calls the infinite canvases, the idea of the screen's this window on this larger arrangement of panels. You can treat the walls of a space like that, like this larger arrangement, and then the person who's looking around, moving around. One of the tricky things with that is words. As soon as you have to read a word balloon, you have to kind of get so you can read a word balloon, and you kind of start to lose awareness of the stuff around it. So I found those kind of comics tend to work better either where you don't have any words at all, or maybe you separate out the words and pictures. There was a really good, the name has gone from my head. There was a really good exhibition at the V&A a few years ago. Oh God, it's going to bother me that I can't remember the name of it. I'll come back to it. But one of the things they did in that was they had, they didn't call it a comic, it was a comic. But they had...
never used the C word in big institutions.
But they had a lovely kind of arrangement of panels telling a story, and then they just had the dialogue when it was spoken as a separate little page down there, and that got you to kind of use the space but still have a sense of it. There's a lot you can do with, and there's great stuff you can do with physical spaces where one of the ones I did at Hertfordshire, and it was also at Central St Martin's, was kind of like a gunfight between two cowboys, and I kind of did the 2 panels on either side of the corridor, so you were kind of literally kind of in the gunfight between the 2 people. So there's a lot of fun you can have with kind of 3-dimensional space.
So something we've talked about in a way, or at least touched on, is different audiences, people who might come across your zines, people who are attracted to that format of comics, people who might walk along a corridor and see a comic, or read a webcomic, or buy a zine. I mean, is that something that you think about at all, Paul? Because obviously you have potentially very different audiences for your comics. Someone who picked up a copy of Viz in, I was going to say W.H. Smith, in T.G. Jones, as it's regenerated as, and might never read any other style of comics. Someone who might buy a chapter of one of your books at caption. Someone who might buy one of your graphic novels in Waterstones. Do you think about those different audiences and how they read them? Or is it just you're happy to have readers?
I have been overly obsessed with that side of it. So I don't sit down and think when I'm doing it. Well, I sort of do. But I always thought in really popularist terms. Like, I want Coronation Street viewers. But I don't think, oh, how can I market this if that's what you mean. But I find, so I've realised that I live in Milton Keynes and I've lived there for like a few decades, and I try and involve myself locally and doing things locally. So I've had a couple of murals on shop units that have been closed in recent years. So, and they've been on there for, not currently, but in the past, they've been on there for several years, thanks to the pandemic, actually. Well done. So I like taking advantage of those opportunities when they come along, which is so infrequent. But I think that sort of engages normal people in comics. So I think in that way, I think when I keep going about Why Don't You Love Me, but when I did that, I was thinking in terms of it being an old style Sunday newspaper strip. They don't exist anymore, but it meant that people who don't consider themselves into comics, who might be of a certain age, will know what those are and would have read those and enjoyed those. Not my ones necessarily, but Sunday comic strips. So I do think like that, yes. But I do also have a contrary nature, which is to not do what everyone else seems to be doing, which isn't mainly helpful.
I mean, you mentioned Corrie in passing, and you've said in the past how soap operas are an influence on your comics, and even if you are taking, the genre of soap opera and then adding a sci-fi or a magical realist twist, perhaps by doing that it's widening the audience? Or do you think there is a comics audience and a non-comics audience?
I don't really think about the comics that we're making in this room fall into this category, but I think comics can often feel impenetrable to people who might otherwise be interested in reading them. I think my stuff has ideas in it that aren't necessarily popular ideas, but I think they're accessible because they have elements that they recognise from, I don't know, soap operas, for example. I'm less inclined to think of soap operas in those terms because I think soap operas are becoming massively unpopular compared to other means of entertainment in the last 10 years. But yeah, I don't think there's any harm in thinking that way, as long as I don't think I'm using it as part of my armoury, not all of my armoury. And I've got other things that I hope are weird, and I try and find a way of saying something new using methods of delivery that people might recognise, I guess, and comics, which I don't really think overly about. It's every other element I think about. That was a good rambling answer.
No, not at all. I mean, Lucy, I guess in a way you've had to think about audiences from day one because the first version of Barking was a crowdfunding project. So right from the start thinking about how do I get people to invest in this?
Yeah, although I did I self-published the first 2 chapters and sold them at the sadly demised Catfoot comic and Zen K, and sold them out quite quickly. So I went, and I'd had an idea in my head because I was going to Ladies Do Comics or LD Comics now, and I thought I'd be getting people who were interested in auto-bio, and that's, sort of not really a male generally reader group, it's more sort of female non-binary, but actually I have quite a high male readership, so I think you just never know who your readers are, and I gave up on that, worrying about that quite early on. I thought whoever reads it, it's more about what you want them to take from it rather than who they are, and making sure that they're going to be able to. My bigger fear was, would they understand what I was trying to say, because it was quite a weird way to visually, it was quite unusual. Will I be able to get across to them the points that I wanted to make, and will I be able to get them into the experience of it? I want them to feel quite immersive comics, so can I get people to feel what I want them to feel out of it? It becomes more about how you're going to do that, because I don't think you can categorise. It's such an intimate relationship between the creator and the reader. It's a one-on-one, and you think about how many things you get to take in creatively that are one-on-one. You can't go to the cinema and have it to yourself unless you go on a Tuesday at 10 or whatever, But it's such an intimate thing that I think you've got to think of it more in terms of like, how am I going to speak to that one person when they pick up the book, and how am I going to get into their put them in my shoes and into my character's shoes and make them feel the process of the story. I think it becomes more about that, I think, the conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It sounds a bit stalkery, but I'm not trying to force you to do anything. But it's really lovely because you can put in, I try and put personal experience, especially with shelter, through folklore. And I've had, like this one came out of, I was going home one night and I realised that I was accidentally following this guy, and he ended up getting off at the same street as me, like walking down the same street, and I was walking behind him. And there's lots of people would know, like walking home in the dark, especially if you feel vulnerable, is really scary, right? I was taught to put keys through my fists at a young age and stuff. Yeah, to protect yourself. I grew up in London, it's what you learn. And then I suddenly felt like the shoe was on the other foot, and I was like stalking this guy, and it just came up with this idea of this woman who gets her revenge by stalking the guy back, kind of thing. So I am quite stalkery then, apparently. But
part of your creative method.
Yeah, but what was nice was having some guys come up to me after reading it and saying I'd never really got why I could freak someone out by walking up behind them on a dark street, and now I understand how creepy that must be, and it made people sort of go into the experience of it a little bit more. So I think it's more about that. So less who they are, but how are you going to draw them, whoever they are, into your story. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Zen, with your book, so were you thinking about audiences at all, or was it just actually this is the story I want to tell? Because it feels in a way they're kind of popular genres, sort of, something that touches on the gothic, that touches on horror, something that touches on cyberpunk, that touches on, the concerns of the techno lives that we're living these days.
Yeah, like with Runaway, it was kind of like a topical thing, because like we're kind of in the whole AI age. So, it's like a post-dystopian, but like even further than that sort of setting. And I kind of did have to think about audience for Runaway, because it was for Short Books Comics Fair. So, you like the fair pulls a lot of traffic and people make pretty decent money out of it. So that's like something I had to consider. And for Carlton Street, it was like, because I did make it, like intend to have it printed, but it wasn't like something that I would ever think that it would get like published or anything. So it was mostly something that I really just wanted to make for myself, but like if other people liked it, then that just made me happy.
Yeah, nice. So we've got about 10-15 minutes for questions. Does anyone in the audience have any questions for any of our panelists? Mark Stafford.
Hey. No, I was just thinking, generally everybody in the art field at the moment and in comics is thinking in terms of like prestige graphic novel, which is somewhere around 150, 200 pages or so. And Julia, I can't remember her name, Julia Gruffer, I don't know how you pronounce her name, a really great cartoonist, worked for Fantagraphics. She said, we're all idiots, because essentially, if you work on a book for 10 years, it's going to come out and you'll get exactly the same amount of reviews and coverage and whatever as if you'd created something shorter and whatever. I don't know how many people are aiming for some big thing just because they think they have to create a big thing. But she's creating essentially books that are about 70 pages long. And they look nice and they're perfect bound and that's the perfect length for the stories they are. I think of that cartoonist Jason from Norway, all of his books seem to be the perfect length for what they are. But I'm slowly coming around to the idea that kind of European album length of kind of 48 to 64 pages, that they have that length for a reason. It's a good length for a comic to be.
Someone's doing submissions for 48 pages. Who was that? I got approached about it. I have to look it up. There was a publisher that's looking at... Because IDW are doing 48 pages, I think.
I don't know to what extent you just get the ideas you have and they're going to be what they are. But is everybody in control? And can you kind
That's
of go,
it's story...
I must have 70-page ideas.
I think the story dictates and it tells you what size. Because that was 30... That's 36 pages or whatever. I don't know how big it'd be. And then I got the research grant. And the next one's going to be like 180. And that's not by choice, right? Because it's just that it works out with the story. I've tried, believe me, I've tried to make it smaller, but it just, I think, do you find your story dictates? Or I think...
Yeah, story dictates, or sometimes format can dictate as well. It's, I think, like, going back to what you were saying, it's partly just like, where will people buy this thing? Which audience will you get? Like, there's a reason you were talking about this idea of a book has to be 150 pages, blah, 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 and it's got... If that's what people are perceiving as selling at the moment, and if, more important, when someone comes to the bookstore, that's what they expect to buy, that's what most books are going to end up at. It's a question of... It's interesting if there's a publisher, if IDW are now putting out like 40 pages.
Yeah, I think it's...
Presumably that's because they figured out there's a market for it somewhere. Yeah. So you've just got to keep an eye on where the market is.
Go against that. So my next book, that's not it, but the one I'm working on after the next one, I've gone old style British, and we're going as big as I can, get away with. The trend is the other way. So
there are big and more European sized ones, I got to go to Angoulême this year, and oh god, they're so beautiful, and I was like, oh, how do we get?
But the commercial instinct is to go paperback size and.
But then it's shipping, because like I can't get that in a post box. I have to, you have to think about.
But I don't think you should think about that.
No,
I think you should do what you want. You want to do something of substance.
£500.
That doesn't then worry about that worry about itself later on.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, if you're going to draw on a ball, that would be ridiculous. You know enough.
I can make that work.
Yeah, well, I was thinking of you as I said it. It's subconscious. Yeah. But I think it's an interesting question if you're seeking to earn a living, which is perfectly reasonable, and then that's an interesting commercial challenge. But it's so time consuming.
It's like, how many of these have I got?
That's it, mate. I've already got arthritic thumbs, but you want to do what you want to do, surely. If you're not earning any money, you might as well not earn any money doing what you want to do, rather than not earn any money and do what you think is commercial.
Here's where the soft novel comes in. Have you heard about this? I'm already considering it. So the soft novel is this new thing where it's a novel but with some illustration. So, and you can do some comic pages within that. So now my third shelter book, I'm like, is this going to be a soft novel, surely? Because the idea of drawing another 200 odd pages, maybe I'll go with the 70.
So that sounds like a format that has worked in children's books, and now they're thinking, can we do this for adults?
It made me think about the Monsters one. Oh gosh, it's beautiful. They made a film of it. Monster Calls. And it's got those gorgeous illustrations in amongst the novel. And I think, maybe it's going for maybe YA or something. Colleen Douglas did a book, a soft novel book, and she told me about it, and I was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for, but I have to see.
Interesting. Any other questions?
Yeah, well, sort of an addendum onto that one is, on the creative side of things, how do you stop them becoming too long? If you want to keep something short form, how do you stop it going out of control and not right into the G?
You definitely don't write it as you're going. You know your ending when you start.
Get an outline.
Yeah, so you have an outline. And if I was working, because most of the time I'm drawing my own stuff now, when I was working with artists, I wouldn't want to fuck them about. So I'd I need to know where this is going, I need to know I can bring it in under X number. So you have a clear outline, and then you can still have room for discovery and stuff, but most stuff is 3-act structure, right? You're beginning, middle, end. your beginning's a quarter the size, your middle's half the size, your end's quarter. It's just the rhythm of storytelling, unless you're doing something interesting, formally interesting, as Kieran Gillen would say.
So break it down.
Yeah, break it down.
Be your own
Find
editor.
I've got this much intro. If I've spent 10 pages for my intro, I've got 10 pages for my conclusion, and I've got 20 pages for my middle.
Yeah.
And you just be very...
And how long it would take you. Because I realised that it was 10 chapters, then it was like, well, I need 2 chapters to get in. How many pages per chapter? 10. So that's 20 pages I'm already drawing. Like, how long is it going to take you if you've got 120 pages? How long is it going to take you to draw it? So that's why with that I did it just biro, carbon, no pencils, didn't plan it, just straight in. You start realising the length of it, and as soon as you break it down and get your head around how many pages it's going to be and how long that's going to take, that will make you reduce. That will make you go, well, how am I going to pull that off? Especially if you're doing it part-time, or you've got to think about it. So,
and like Paul said about editing, it forces you to edit. But also anything you edit, keep, because that's probably something else. If it's a good bit and you have to cut it, maybe that's the start of another story.
I would say it's important to allow yourself lots of room for spontaneity, because it's going to take you a long time, and you don't want to get 2/3 of the way through and feel over familiar with what you're doing.
And it's the kill your darlings theory, which I learned in animation. It's the script writer William Goldman, I think, said it. That if your story can continue without that section, that if it still works without it, you've got to kill it, right? You just, no matter how much you like it, put it into another story, but think about how much you really need certain elements, or whether they could just maybe go and sit on the pile for a bit. It is really hard to do, especially when I was hand animating and I'd have to go, it was 4 weeks of my life, but it's bringing nothing, so bye-bye. It's harsh, but will make, you've got to think of the end product overall, and how you can, because you don't want to bore your audience, right? So keep it snappy.
Zen, did you have to cut loads of things out in order to fit the size?
Yeah, because I have this problem where I can only finish stuff when I have like a really strict deadline. So like when you have like this deadline approaching and you're like, you've penned maybe 5 pages just for like an introduction, and you're like, this pacing is not gonna work. So you have to cut the introduction down like by maybe 2-3 pages, and just like, I don't know, you really have to think about how the pacing works, because I feel like I always lay down my work with like a script, and that's how I kind of like dedicate or like imagine the pacing to work in my mind. So if one section is like getting too much time being dedicated to it, and it's like not that important, you kind of have to trim that out.
Make a dummy book. Do you know dummy books? Yeah, they're vital, I think. So just like a rough drawn, this size version of your book.
Like
just sketch the page really roughly, so you know what the page turn's going to be like, where the beats are, check that it's all working. You should all get Shelley Bond's book, Filth and Grammar, and that goes over all the different parts of comic making, and it's from like different teams and stuff, but she's got some amazing tips in there to how to keep your stuff concise, because she teaches you how to be your own editor, basically. So buy Filth and Grammar, and that will help.
What was it called?
Filth and Grammar. It's on her website. What are they called now? The press. It's her and Phillips. Off Register Press. And they do digital versions as well, so you don't actually have to get the book, because they're in America. Although Shelley's going to be at the Lakes.
Oh yeah, she's coming over for the Lakes.
So, and if she's in the UK, she'll probably get some copies in Gosh or something, I'd have thought. But it's really worth it. I have it on my desk. It's like a Bible now. It's like, what does Shelley say? It's worth it.
We've probably got time for one last question.
Yeah, so this is a thought, in a kind of counter to what you're saying about trying to keep things as short and sweet as possible. I know that there's definitely an appetite for much more long-running series. I mean, if you look at like long-running web comics, for instance, or even like manga, like comics in the East, where you've got like a single series like running over decades with like 20 volumes, and it's really, really popular. Now, part of that is because there's this big infrastructure, in Japan in booming market to allow that, whereas for smaller creators it's much more of a risk to dedicate your time, which I understand, but you can see in like webcomics there is a clear desire there for these long-running stories that really have like space and time to fully develop all the ideas, right, flesh it out fully. And I was just wondering, like, do you feel a bit hampered by the fact that there isn't the infrastructure, say, in the UK to allow that kind of thing?
Oh, definitely. It doesn't. You can't earn a living. I mean, the advances are appalling. You'll have to take on other work and do other jobs just to pay your own bills. I get Arts Council grants. I think if we had that infrastructure, if you could earn a living, I mean, I could do a whole lecture on universal basic income and how important that could be for creativity, but we won't go there. But yeah, I think, Japan and France, it's more going to Angoulême and seeing how, people are valued as these like auteurs, and you just think, God, I just tell people I make comics, they just go, oh, can my kid read it? Like, no, not really. I'm completely skint, and like, still probably your greatest chance of getting paid is to be adapted, and then even then I don't know if that would bring much money. I think it does hold you back, because you have to think about ultimately how long it's going to take you for graphic novels, but that's where like zines are great, and webcomics like Chazelaine Khan's Boozer is just going to get released as a printed book with Abrams, which is amazing, and Chazelaine's been working on that for ages, right? It's a huge sprawling webcomic. It's amazing to see it collected, but I guess if you're going to do it, I only think in print. I do very traditional work, so I don't think in terms of webcomics. I have to think about the print costs, and I have to think about, will a publisher want to pay for it, and if they don't, how am I going to crowdfund it, how am I going to ship it? So yeah, I think we are quite hampered by that, but unfortunately that's the cards we've been dealt in the UK for the moment. Hopefully Seasick will change that a little bit. If you don't know the cartoonist, I always get it wrong. Cultural Impact Collective, who Zara's part of, and they're going to the government and trying to get more funding and interest into comics and creators. So yeah, there are avenues, but I don't know if everyone else feels like they're restricted by it.
Paul, have you been NDA'd about the adaptation fee you got for it?
So I've been making comics for 40 odd years, and I've only started to break even about 10 years ago, but I'm currently living the dream. Through some miracle, Why Don't You Love Me's been optioned as a A24 movie.
Oh wow!
So I'm actually earning normal money at the moment,
Yay!
I now spend my days pottering about, meaning to start drawing comics. I'm getting slightly more drawing done than I used to when I had a full-time job, but I couldn't go back to work for a proper job. I feel traumatised by the whole experience. But yes, we don't have anything here. And in fact, in the 70s, at least we had like a comic industry. I don't really feel we have that particularly anymore. People actually earn money by drawing regular comic strips. I don't think that happens. You've got to be like Daniel and you guys, you've got to find ways of hustling, because that's how it feels, hustling ways of getting money out of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just blundered into this side of it. I don't think I could have done it 10 years ago, or who knows, 7 years from now. But
it's because the film industry's got money, and the publishing doesn't. There's just nothing in it.
Yeah.
I worked on a film and I got paid the same for 2 weeks' work as I had for my advance on my next book that will take me 3 years. Yeah. So go figure, right? And that was a bad wage for the film industry.
I think for long form web, they're a great opportunity to do these expansive stories. I think a lot of the ones we still think are successful today built their audience in an earlier version of the web. So they built their version in a version of the web, but it was much easier to discover webcomics and follow them, and so they've kind of carried this larger audience with them now. I think you can still build audiences for long form web stuff, but like with a lot of stuff, you are basically you're a VTuber except you're making comics, right? It's like you've got to be constantly putting content out. If you build an audience who come to your comic every week, or God help you every day, you can never stop, because as soon as you miss an update, you lose your audience. So I think it's if you've got to be really, really into the story you're telling, and you've got to ideally have enough of a large cast of characters that you can hop around between them, and you can always kind of find a bit more story to tell. Look at something like Jeff Jack's questionable content, right? It's almost unrecognizable now from the strip it was, because the characters have kind of shifted and evolved, and he clearly kind of gets interested in one group of characters, lets them move on, focuses on another group of characters, and he found a way to keep himself doing stuff that he's interested in. But if questionable content launched today, I don't know how it found its audience in a simpler version of the web and has carried it with it, and it's allowed it to keep kind of growing the audience. And I think that's the trick, and especially now in a kind of like crazy fragmented social media scene, knowing where to promote and how to promote, and to some extent all you do now is you're literally putting your comics up on social media, and then just letting hope people will eventually notice you and follow you back to wherever you've hooked in your store or your Patreon or whatever. So
and comics are just designed to not do that well on social media, because no one's going to be zooming in and reading all the panels. So it's like the way the algorithm works, it's like you're just constantly debuffed in a way.
I think it's just like super short form is what works, and like trying to do long form stories, it's doable, but it's really hard.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have to call time here. Are all four of you around for the rest of the afternoon?
Yep.
Should anyone in the audience want to ask you a question
Absolutely.
one-to-one? So do please find these wonderful, friendly people outside afterwards. If you enjoyed this conversation, there's hundreds of these that I've conducted over the years, and you can download the podcasts from www.panelborders.wordpress.com. And in the meantime, Lucy, Zen, Paul and Daniel, thank you very much for coming and doing this panel.